Guild has a new Rosewood dreadnought in the mix. Today we're taking a look at the newly released Guild D-50. Stick around. Hey, you're watching Alamo Music TV. My name is Chris McKee.
And I'm Cooper Greenberg.
We're here with Alamo Music in San Antonio, Texas, and you can find us online at alamomusic.com. If you are new to the channel, make sure you subscribe, turn on notifications, like our videos. If you want to support us and the channel, make sure you visit our Spring store link below for custom swag. Check out our podcast, the Fretboard Confessional, or you can send food to either Cooper or I. Yeah, we accept all sorts.
It's going to be Cap's chicken curry for me.
Yeah, that sounds really good.
Yeah,
they're close today. Yeah, so we've got great new guitars to take a look at today. This is the newly released Guild D-50. Now, this is part of a trio of new models that have been released by Guild, the F40, the D40, and the D-50, all part of the standard lineup made in the US. Stripped down models focusing really, I think, kind of on simple aesthetics and great tone and playability. And this is the Rosewood version in that lineup, which is really fantastic.
Yeah, so we did our kind of overview of all three, and we've talked about D40s, we've talked about D55s, as you reminded me, because they go out of my head because we don't see them that often.
Fly off the shelf.
But let's open this one up because we talked about the specs and we've kind of heard them, but I want to hear from you, why is Spruce Rosewood the king combination?
Well, I mean, some people would say it's not, but
here's why I say that. It's you got plenty of arguments against it. However, you take two guitars that are exactly the same, except one's mahogany back and one's rosewood back. Rosewood's always going to be more expensive and probably more popular.
Yeah, I think because of the characteristics of Rosewood, for a lot of reasons, it has been considered to be the premium tone wood that you would get on an acoustic guitar. I think there's a lot of reasons for that, and the big two that compete are Rosewood and mahogany. And I think the reason for that is because they are almost polar opposites in what you get from a tonality standpoint.
Yeah.
So we'll talk about mahogany first because that's not what we're holding. Mahogany guitars, when it's a spruce top, it's mahogany back and sides. There is a very dry sound from a standpoint that there's not a lot of overtones going on with it. And you have a very pronounced mid-range with not a lot of focus on bass, not a lot of focus on treble. Playing by yourself, most people will describe that as a very warm tone. And when you're playing with others, the characteristics of that guitar, which is the lack of overtones and that pronounced mid-range, will help you, just kind of like on electric guitar, cut through a mix so that you can be heard when you're doing flat picking runs or something to that effect, or when you are just trying to fill out the rest of the sound with the band. For a long time, Spruce and Rosewood has been kind of considered the singer-songwriter preferred guitar. And the reason is because a lot of times if you fall into that kind of category, you're by yourself. When you're writing, you're by yourself. Sometimes when you're playing, you're by yourself. And what a Rosewood guitar does is it's got a lot of bass and it's got a lot of treble. So you've got that richness and you've got the chime and you have all of these overtones to help complement the fact that you don't have a lot of other instruments that are playing.
Yeah.
It's almost what a lot of people do with reverb and delay. There's this coloration that's going on with your sound. And then it's got a scooped mid-range, which means it's not competing with your voice because the human voice is typically occupying those frequencies where mid-range on an acoustic guitar often would be. And so it's a really nice complement to someone who's out there writing songs and singing.
Yeah.
And so, I think for a lot of reasons, and then people just like bass and overtones. It's a really nice aspect of it. They will still cut through mixes with that chime that you've got, and Rosewood looks fantastic. So.
It does look fantastic. This is the D-50 and the Antique Sunburst.
This is Natty,
which always will probably be my preference, but I do think the bursts on all these look really good.
I actually really like Guilds and Sunburst.
Yeah,
I have a preference for
that's one that I've noticed, especially, I mentioned in the last video, but the 12-string jumbos, everybody I've ever talked to wants the burst version. I think it's cool. So Spruce Rosewood, this is in the camp that we're competing with all the classics, right? The D28, HD28, more like an HD28 because it's got scallop bracing, does not have herringbone, but that's not really going to affect your sound. But I think, well, podcast.
If we don't get too geeky.
Podcast talk.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, we've seen it. There's another small builder in the U.S., Gibson, has
Little guys.
most of their old school classics going to be spruce mahogany. They put out the Songwriter. We've talked a lot about the Songwriter, severely underrated guitar.
Very much.
So, you know, you're kind of going up against Songwriters, HD28s, you know, these big heavy hitters.
Yeah.
And I think this one is just a nice thing to add to your look into list when you're looking for a spruce rosewood dreadnought. I think they look the part, nice finish, antique gloss, not quite gloss, not quite full-on satin. It's just a good in-between. And I just think they are, like you said in that previous video, straight out of the case, play awesome. They sound great. And kind of a very simple guitar that they don't come with pickups. You can add a pickup in, it's going to sound great. It comes with a hard shell case, made in the USA. So it's kind of checking all the boxes, I think. But I think it's worth it to show off. It's weird, we always talk about spruce rosewood being the combo.
Yeah.
But then a lot of classic famous dreadnoughts are spruce mahogany. And so there's interesting place to play there. I want to get into one thing that nobody's probably asking, but I think since we're talking about woods, it'd be fun to hear you talk about it. We talk spruce rosewood, spruce mahogany, and then there's mahogany. Why don't you ever see a rosewood?
That's a great question. I have never played a rosewood topped guitar.
I've only seen one available, and it was that one.
Yeah.
That you know what I'm talking about.
Yeah. It's a rarity. I've seen it pop up on nylon string guitars more often than anything else. I think there's a number of problems regarding the makeup of what the wood is. You know, earlier on I was saying that this and mahogany are polar opposites, right? Koa is a lot like mahogany. Those are the two-tone woods that you typically see used for a top. And that's because the wood that's used on the top usually, which is spruce, or in some cases cedar, is a very, very soft tone wood.
Yeah.
Cedar is particularly soft, and we know you don't have a lot of volume with cedar because of that, right? It's very responsive. Spruce is harder and more stiff than cedar is, and so you can get all of this great responsiveness and this volume out of it. But when you compare it to rosewood, rosewood is a fairly dense tone wood. And so mahogany is a lot more stiff and harder than spruce is, same with Koa. And so you know what you get out of it. When you use that as a top wood, you get this kind of natural compression, okay? And this kind of chunkiness that goes along with the guitar. And it works. You're not going to have as much volume out of it, and it's just going to compress and be focused and warm. I think if you made a top out of rosewood, it's doable, but there's a lot of kind of caveats and addendums that go along with that. You'd have to make it thin enough so that it would vibrate, and it would probably be even more compressing than mahogany because of its density. It does have a very fast kind of velocity, which is what generates its overtones. So that could be problematic in trying to have like the articulation that you want. So in my mind, not having played one, I think what you would end up with is a guitar that's heavy, that doesn't have a lot of volume to it, and doesn't give you the kind of sound that you are typically wanting out of an acoustic guitar.
There you go.
So knowing the aspects of the tone woods, that's my my best guess.
I just think it's interesting to talk about. I don't know if anybody's asking that question, but it's worth talking about. If you want something that's not a spruce top on a guild, check out the D-20 or the M20 for your mahogany top needs. But we're talking spruce rosewood. I got to play this for you, so take a listen, and we'll be back with final thoughts.
I think the name of the game with these guitars is that they've basically nailed the fundamentals of what you want in a classic vintage styled and sounding guitar from a great American manufacturer with fantastic playability and all of the stuff that you need and none of the stuff that you don't. I like that they haven't put a pickup in there. It really allows someone who is a player, like a Nashville cat who has a preference, to put in the pickup that they know they're going to prefer. So yeah, I really think they've nailed it. We've talked in the other video, not so much in this one, about the finish. It's a semi-gloss nitro finish. I think that's a win. It's simple binding here. There's no binding on the neck. You can kind of see the fret tangs just sticking out, which is great. It's a simplistic approach to a great guitar. And in these, it's like the D-55 stripped down. Yeah. So you can have your cake and eat it too. You like that?
Chocolate cake. I feel like, and I don't know if this is true, I'm sure they've been working on these for quite a long time, but at the time that we saw everybody put out satin finish guitars over the last 2 years or so, I mean, Taylor's been doing it forever, and they have their own thing. I don't even really consider them in that category. But with Martin and Gibson, it's almost like Guild waited, and they were like, we know we're going to do that, but let's take notes from them and do something based on audience reaction, like that we think is a little bit better. So they're smoother, glossier than the Gibson satin faded finishes, and I think they just look super sharp. And I think they kind of maybe took notes from Martin and Gibson and what people have been saying about those guitars, and didn't try to tag on anything else other than the finish. Any other changes or concessions or anything, and that's a whole thing. We've talked plenty about guitar companies adding in satin finishes into the lineups. We've talked about it plenty on the channel. I just think they knew they were going to do it, and they waited until they had something that I think people are going to really like. I like that they're light and easy to play and smooth, closed pore but still really thin nitro, and it's great. They did a good job.
Resonant, playable, it's perfect. I will say this, and this is going to be a call out for older school worship leaders that might watch this video, but I really am partial to this particular model in the lineup with this burst, because back in the late 90s, a worship leader named Daryl Evans, who made it big, he went to the school that I graduated from at ORU, and he had crazy amount of super popular songs, like Trading Mark Sorrows was a big one. Anyways, he did this album that song was on called Freedom. And on the cover of the album and inside, there's stylized artwork of him standing like on the side of a river, holding a Guild dreadnought guitar with a burst like this, and it was cool. And I remember looking at it going, that's a very cool Guild. And the only reason I knew it was a Guild was because of the pickguard shape and the bridge, because it was kind of otherwise not very clear. So I really like this just because it brings back those old memories of playing Trading My Sorrows or something else on it. So if you identify with that, drop a comment below and say, oh yeah, I remember that album. I remember that guitar.
Well, I don't know that album, but I think that's cool either way. And
Lincoln Brewster was on that album. A very, very, very young
There's
Lincoln
our
Brewster was on
crossover
that
right
album.
there.
So there you go.
Young Lincoln, Willie Lincoln. Cool, man. Yeah, I think these are nice. I think a lot of people, once you get them in your hands, you will understand that they do compare. They kind of hit that upper echelon of American-made Spruce Rosewood dreads, which is, that's the first thing to go always. So yeah, I think people are going to dig these. If you're in the area, please come by, because we have all 6 of the new Guild standards with more backstock coming, but we're anticipating, and Guild is anticipating, it's going to be a pretty large launch for them. So while you can come play them, and if you really like them, let us know and we'll make sure we get you one.
More specifics and pricing is on our website, which is
alamomusic.com.
And you can chat with someone. You can, like you said, come in, but if you can't come in because you're not local, you can definitely check it out there and get all the information you need and chat with someone live, which is great. And let us know in the comments below what you think about these new guitars, particularly the D-55. And if you're new to the channel, D-50, sorry.
But we have D-55s coming too, if that's your thing. We'll get them.
Yeah. And if you're new to the channel, you know what to do. You just subscribe and you turn on notifications and you like our videos and you keep coming back, and we will be here for you.